So this semester the course code is CPS 212, and the course name is Object-Oriented Software Development using VB.NET. VB.NET. Okay. Now, VB.NET is an object-oriented programming language, just like we learned C++ level 100, and then Java um, level 100 second semester, and last semester Java 2. Okay, we are going to look at yet another programming language, which is also a structured programming language, um, and it's VB.NET. Okay. Um, so we'll look at the various um, content that we are going to talk about this semester. I'll take you through the course description, the objectives, what to expect at the end of the semester, the course content, the mode of delivery, and then some recommended materials, some of which I have, and I'll share with you as well. Thanks. So, object-oriented software development with VB.NET. Okay. Just like we did with C++ and Java, we are going to look at the various basic syntax that has to do with VB.NET. Okay, first and foremost, we look at the introduction to VB programming language, VB.NET programming language, what it is all about, um, why you need to, why you have this as part of your curriculum for you to study. We'll look at the basic syntax, the control structures, um, how to handle data, how to develop applications with user interface, graphical user interface, Windows Form. We look at how to add database as well using the ADO.NET. And also, um, lastly, we'll talk about VBA, VBA, Visual Basic Application, which is also used in the Microsoft suites that we have for Microsoft Word, Microsoft Office, Excel, Microsoft Excel, PowerPoint, Access, and so on. Okay, so there is a developer feature in all these Office suites. Okay, Microsoft Office suites. So we are going to explore the Excel and see how we can use that to develop a functional application with a user interface. Okay, we all know Excel to be a tool for spreadsheets, um, having some set of rows and columns, cells, okay, where you just enter data. But we are going to give some more functionality to it. So aside just entering the data, we are going to write codes behind the cell to perform certain functionality. I remember some few years ago when I was doing my national service, we were working with um, the University of Ghana campus. We were working with one of the departments known as the Language Center, and it's a department that handles what we call academic writing. In your context, we say communication skills. And we realize that this is a course that is done by every student in the on campus. Every student has to pass through this department. Okay, so during our national service, we realized that we had difficulty. The lecturers had difficulty with handling of results and all that. Okay, so my senior colleague I met there had used Excel to develop a nice application with a nice interface for the lecturers. Okay, to enter results, and once they enter the results, automatically grades the students. Okay, and there's a graph to show the performance of the students and all that. And he used Excel. Okay, and what did he do? He wrote VB codes, or what we call the VBA codes, behind various cells to perform that function. Okay, so a lot of people will say, oh, VB is an outdated programming language. People don't use VB again, blah, blah, blah. Okay, but it's still functional in our day and age. So it's good we learn this. Is some of you might have difficulty understanding the Java and C++ that we did, but VB might come to you with ease. Okay, you can even develop applications using Excel or some vendor somewhere. Okay, or you know someone who they take their what's it called inventory and so on with Excel. You can at the end of this course, you should be able to go to them and tell them, oh, you want to modify their Excel for them. Give it some graphical user interface so that immediately they open it, they don't just see the various cells, rows, and columns, but they'll see a user interface with which they can enter the the stock or the items that they have, give it a price, okay, and so on. Okay, so like I said, this course is still relevant in this day and age. Okay. All right. Let's look at the course description. Course description. So this course will introduce you to fundamentals of VB programming, as well as the object-oriented concepts of VB programming. You'll be able to use or you'll learn the VB.NET syntax, control structures, object-oriented programming concept, functions, okay, and also Windows Form. We call it Windows Form. That's the way last semester we did the swing components with the Java. Okay, this time around we do what we call the Windows Form to develop applications with VB.NET. And then you learn how to write, debug, and deploy VB.NET programs. Okay. Now, the applications we are going to develop in this course will be in three parts. The first part would have to do with the console application. So console application, applications without user interface. Then the next part of the course, we look at applications with a simple graphical user interface, what we call the GUI, okay, using Windows Form. And then the third part will be focused on Excel, Microsoft Excel. Okay. So the course objective is that you should be able to write and execute VB programs using Visual Studio. We are going to use Visual Studio. Okay, not Visual Studio Code, but Visual Studio. Okay. Then you should also understand variables, data types, operators, control structures, functions when it comes to VB.NET. Okay, we'll be working with arrays and exception handling also in VB.NET. And also how to implement basic um, basic OOP concepts, okay, in VB.NET, and then develop simple GUI application using Windows Forms. And then finally, um, developing VBA applications in Excel, Microsoft Excel. Okay. So today being our first meeting, I'll do a quick introduction to VB and then the Visual Studio, which is the software we are going to use. And then from next week, we'll look at variables, data types, and operators in VB.NET. Then we'll look at control structures. Then we'll look at procedures and functions. We'll look at arrays. We'll look at the object-oriented programming concepts. We'll look at error, what is exception handling, the use of try, catch, and finally blocks. Then we'll look at Windows Forms, so how to create a graphical user interface application. We look at the various controls and event handling, how we can connect database to the application. Okay, and then we look at Excel. Okay. So without much ado, let's move straight into the introduction. Yeah. I think I left a few things out. So the mode of delivery is always the same or would always be the same from previous semesters. We are using it's going to be online and in person. So we are told that the online will be for 2 weeks. Okay, so this week and then next week. Then from next 2 weeks, we will meet face to face. I want to believe that that will not change, okay, so that we can have more in-person sessions. And then there'll be practical demonstration as we always do for our face-to-face meetings. There'll also be group projects. Okay, so I don't know if we still have the groupings from last semester. We did some groups last semester, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So if that list is there, there'll be some group projects that we work on, especially when it comes to the Windows form and then the Excel parts. Okay. So this sem, your attendance, I'll be very strict when it comes to attendance. So like we've done, you are supposed to type your name, index number, and then whether you are in part-time or full-time in the chat. Okay. Then the online sessions, I'll try as much as possible to have separate sessions. Okay, so that's if I have the opportunity to have separate sessions if it's online. But if it's not possible, then if I'm engaged, what will happen is that we will have a joint session, joint session that's in the evenings of Fridays. And yes, there'll be attendance. Okay, I'll be very key on this. I'll send you a document for assessment, which you'll have to print out. Um, you have to print out. We'll use that for assessment. So any quiz we do, be it on the LMS, which we are going to use a lot this semester. So materials and quizzes will be on the LMS for you do, and also in-person quizzes when we are in class. So we'll be using the assessment book for the in-person quiz in class. Last semester, unfortunately, because a majority of the session had to be online, we couldn't explore, we couldn't do much. I think due to the venue issue, we couldn't do much when it came to the continuous assessment. So mostly the only thing we did has to be group assignments, which we did. Okay. So this semester we'll be doing a lot. Okay, so I'll send you the material for the assessment, which you have to print, and we'll have a lot of assessment assignments to do. We'll have mid-semester exams, which will be written, and then we'll have our end of sem exams, which will be both practicals and written. This time around, it's not going to be group practicals. Okay, please take note. Your exams will be individual practicals and written. So you are going to write it in the lab. You code everything in the lab, okay, within the period you are given. So please take note of that so that whatever we are learning, you'll not say that, oh, me, I'm in charge of documentation or I'm in charge of compiling the files and submitting it. No, this time you are going to prove your worth as individual. So please um, give yourself to all that we are going to do this semester. Okay, give yourself to it. All right. Um, One of the books that you use aside your handout, which is over here, I'm reading from. I'm trying to update it a bit with a few things. But apart from that, there's this book. Let me see if I have it here. VB.net for professionals. VB.net for professionals. Just a moment, let me check if I have it. But it's free online, so you can easily search for it online and have it downloaded. Uh, it's a it's a skeletal book. If I say skeletal, it gives you the concepts and the syntax, but you don't get the entire code for whatever it's saying, but it explains the concept very well. Okay, so I'm going to combine that together with the slides that we are using, together with the handouts or the lecture notes. Okay, so as and when there's something that is not in the lecture notes, I can refer you to that particular material. VB.net for professionals. All right, so this is it. So, like I said, I think it's free online. Okay, so you can have this downloaded. It talks about almost all the concepts we talk about. I don't think it talks about the Windows form. Okay, there's Windows form here, but you will not get much on it. Like I say, it just gives you context, the syntax to some of the things. It just gives you the syntax. Okay, but we use this together with the lecture notes. The lecture notes has the codes in them. Okay, but when it comes to the concepts, if you want to get some more understanding to some of the concepts, okay, you can use this book as well. All right. Any question before we move into today's introduction? Any question? You can raise your hand if you have a question. If you have a question, you can raise your hand. If there's no question, then we can move on. All right. Please turn off your video. Yes, we are not here to look at your face. Ernest.
Kaluku Ernest.
We are not here to look at your face, so turn off your video. All right, so introduction to VB.NET. And then Visual Studio Code. Okay. So, sorry, Visual Studio, not Visual Studio Code. So, what is VB.NET? So basically, VB.NET stands for Visual Basic. Okay, or VB. VB stands for Visual Basic. Okay, so Visual Basic.NET or Visual Basic Network Enabled Technology. Okay. I started first with the programming language VB, which was a structured programming with a programming language basic. Okay. Then they introduced Visual Basic, which was the more object-oriented format. Okay. Then it was succeeded by VB.NET. It was Basic 6, Visual Basic 6, and then now VB.NET or Visual Basic.NET. Okay, now it is an object-oriented programming language because it supports the concept of object-oriented programming. These are concepts we know from previous semesters. So abstraction, encapsulation, inheritance, polymorphism. Okay. So VB.NET is a programming language developed by Microsoft. Okay, it's developed by Microsoft. That is how come when you use Excel, you see it as there's a developer part, okay, or option. Anytime you use Excel, there's a developer option to it. So if I open my Excel, okay, the tabs here, you see developer. Okay, Most of you don't have it. When we get to that part of the course, I'll show you how to enable it, and then we can use it to write our VB codes. Okay, so it's an application developed by Microsoft as part of what we call the .NET framework. .NET framework. Okay. Now you notice that those of you who have done Windows installation a lot, okay, you've done Windows installation before, you realize that this .NET framework is one of the key uh, features when it comes to installation. Okay, if you are someone who has done installation before, I'm sure you come across .NET framework. Okay. Now, the evolution of VB.NET, okay, started with the classic VB6, Visual Basic 6, okay, and was succeeded by, or now we have the .NET framework, okay. So with the Basic 6, it was enhanced with some features like the full functionality of object-oriented programming, okay, which I've mentioned. Then it had features for what we call strong typing. Okay, features for strong typing. That's to say that it's better, it's handled error checking and compile time handled it very well than the previous basic VB6. And also integrating it with other features in the .NET ecosystem, things like libraries, like databases, web, and desktop application. The introduction of VB.NET makes it easy to integrate it with some of these features or libraries when it comes to database, web, and then desktop application. And then it has the also has a cross-platform capabilities. Okay, so the .NET makes it easy for this cross-platform features. We'll talk about the .NET briefly. So applications built with or VB uses the primitive data types that we know of. That's the int, integer, string, char, boolean, and so on. Okay, and it's also what we call an event-driven programming language. Okay, it's event-driven. Okay, so we've known events and how to use them. And then one other unique thing about VB is that it is not case sensitive. Okay, it's not a case sensitive language, unlike Java and C++, which are case sensitive. VB.NET is not case sensitive. Okay, and you realize that even when we go into it, there are some of the things that we saw in Java, the VB.NET syntax is even easier. Okay, the only thing is that you might be writing more code, but it's relatively easier. Things like adding semicolon at the end of your code, VB.NET, you don't necessarily have to do that. It's not case sensitive. Okay, and a few other things that when we start writing the code, you'd appreciate. Okay, but the syntax and the input and output is more like that of Java. Okay, so in in Java, you use system.out.println. In VB.NET, if it's a console application, you say console.println. uh, um, write line. So instead of the print, they will say write line. Okay, so the console is the same as the system. Okay, so you would see some similarities when it comes to the syntax. Okay, but um, some added advantages that is not case sensitive, and also you don't have to use some of the symbols, okay, like the semicolon to terminate a line of code. Okay. All right. So um, I think I've talked about some of these features already. Um, some of which it supports multi-threading concepts in that you can perform multiple tasks at the same time and so on. There are some advantages and disadvantages. So VB.NET executes a program in such a way that it runs on what we call the common language runtime, which make it stable for execution. Now, VB.NET is a compiler driven program. Okay, it is compiled. It is compiled. It has a pure object-oriented programming base, the use of objects and classes. It uses the Visual Studio IDE, which we'll go through in a few minutes to develop programs and so on. You can also use Visual Studio Code, okay, but you need to add that extension to it to be able to compile the code. But most of the work or most of the functionalities, if you want to use it and use it very well, you get all with Visual Studio. Okay, the Visual Studio IDE. Now it also uses drag and drop elements for web-based design and Windows-based design applications. Okay, so just like we saw last semester with Java, it also uses drag and drop. Okay, but there's one other advantage with VB.NET over the Java in this context when we are doing the Windows forms is that where a lot of you struggle, that's to do with the layout, the choice of layout to use. With VB.NET, you don't have that struggle. You don't have to select the layout before you start. Once you conceptualize the layout you want to do, you are free to go. Okay, so there's nothing like border layout or flow layout or grid layout. Okay, you have to conceptualize how you want your layout to look like, and then you build it in that form. Okay, so most of you, I know that will be an advantage to you. Okay, but others too will prefer the layout to guide them as to how the interface should look like. Okay, then VB.NET can automatically structure your code. It uses what we call the .NET language. VB.NET language is used to transfer data between different layers of architecture. Okay. It also uses a new concept of error handling with the help of the .NET framework, and then uses the on error go to statement. Discourages the use of the on error go to statement in your .NET program. Okay, there are some disadvantages. It's unable to handle pointers directly. If you know of pointers, if you remember C++ first semester level 100, we talked about pointers, okay, which are used mostly when it comes to memory allocation or deallocation in your program. C++ uses it a lot, C and C++. Okay, but pointers, VB.NET language is unable to handle pointers. Why? Because it requires a lot of programming and it's not easy to manage every memory by the pointer. And so additional coding takes extra CPU cycles that increases the processing time. Okay, so this shows the slowness of the VB.NET application. So that's one disadvantage there. Even though it's easy to learn, okay, and that increases a large competition between programmers to apply the project. It reduces a secure job in the programming field as a VB developer. Okay, so that's one disadvantage. Lately, we don't see those jobs being advertised and all that. However, it's still a programming language that, like I said, you can quickly start doing something with. I quite remember when I was in my undergrad, yeah, a course mate of mine developed an application with VB.NET. I think as at that time, we didn't have a GPA calculator. So if you go to in ATU, we say iCampus. You go to iCampus, you don't see your GPA being calculated or CGPA being calculated. So what they did was use VB. We were in level 200 or 300 then. He used VB to develop that application. And he was selling it on campus because people wanted to calculate their GPA. It was difficult calculating the GPA. Unlike now that you have it in your iCampus or now Legon, you would have it in your MIS web. Okay. People didn't know how to calculate it. And in the university handbook, they showed you, or there was this text which showed you how to calculate it. So he used that knowledge to develop the application and was selling it. So when it comes, he installs it for you. When it does updates, he goes around, comes up with posters, sends it to all the halls that he has updated the app. And people were paying for it. I remember I was one of his, how do I put it? Should I say a vendor in my hall? So anyone who had issues with the application in the hall, they will call on me to help them to work with it. Okay. So this was something he was doing at that early stages. Mhm. And fortunately, after level 300, I went to gain some 1 month knowledge on mobile application development. So I got the logic and the idea from him. He wanted to use it as his final year project, but because he was already selling the application, they didn't allow him to do that. So I ride on his logic to transform that application into a mobile application and use that as my project work for undergraduate. Okay, so yes, there might not be any job, okay, being advertised at the moment. Now all you see is Python and JavaScript and all that. Okay. But VB.NET is still relevant. You can do something with it. And like I said earlier, you can do something with even Excel, transform someone's entering of data into cells and make it a more functional application with a graphical user interface. Okay. Another disadvantage uses intermediate language compilation that can easily be decompiled or what we call reverse engineered, but there is nothing that can prevent the application from disintegrating. Okay, so if you know of the phases of compilation, there's a phase known as the intermediate code generation phase. Okay. So um, at that phase, okay, there's a more of a disadvantage there when it comes to VB.NET. Then it uses the just-in-time compiler, um, which Java also uses that same compiler. Okay. It requires to run your application. It means that the target computer needs the just-in-time compiler to interpret the source program inside the intermediate language. Okay, and this also downgrades the performance of the application. So there are some few challenges with the system architecture. Okay. And then lastly, we have here uh, it contains a large collection of library for the just-in-time compiler. And this large library, because of the space they occupy, it takes more time computing. Okay, it takes more time to compute. So these are a few disadvantages with the application. Even in fact, even the Visual Studio application alone, the size is relatively huge. Okay, if you want to use it. At the moment, I'll be using what I have um, uh, since my undergrad days, which is Visual Studio 2010. I still use it because even though there has been a lot of advancement and all that, yes, but it comes with a lot of configurations, which at this level and for the course we are learning, unless maybe you want to go further into it, then that is fine. Okay, but for what we are learning, I don't want to involve myself too much with those configurations. Okay, but the 2010 is still good for whatever we want to develop. Just that there are more current features. I think the last time I installed it, uh, if I had to add, if I had to add other features to it, it was, oh, and it needed internet access to also install. It was over 10 gig. And I can't just keep 10 gig of that application on my laptop just like that, which I'm only using at this point to teach. Okay, so I had to uninstall it and then go back to the 2010, which is should take close to 2 gig space. And that's basically the same thing we'll be doing and teaching in this course. Okay. All right. Just that the newer version, if you are going to work with that, it has features that makes programming and integrating of, especially if you want to do the web application, makes it very easy to implement. A web and then database implementation makes it easy. Okay, but the file size is just too huge to work with. Okay, so I'll consider that so as a disadvantage. However, it's the Visual Studio, which we'll talk about in a moment, is can run multiple programming languages. So you can have your Python installed on it, you can have your C++ installed on it, you can have your Java installed on it, your C Sharp, your JavaScript. You can use it for other programming languages as well. Okay, but the only thing is the size of the file. Okay. All right. So .NET Framework. Like I said, I'm sure a lot of you have come across this, especially if you have installed Windows before. So what is .NET Framework? So it is actually a virtual machine. It's a virtual machine or a virtual machine platform that runs behind the scene in your Windows application. It provides common platform to run applications built using the different languages such as C Sharp, VB.NET, and so on. Okay. So it was also created by Microsoft and it's mainly for building and running Windows application. Okay, so if you have installed Windows before, you come across this in the process of setting up your Windows operating system. Okay, and having to run application, especially a previous version of Windows, Windows 7, Windows 8, 8.1, probably Windows 10. Okay, sometimes when you're installing some application, it will prompt you to update your .NET framework to maybe 4.5 or something, 3.5 in order to run the application. Okay, so there are a lot of versions of it. Okay, one of the things I have to update is the .NET, the current version. So the current version for the .NET framework has to, I think it's still 4.8. I think 4.8.1 is the current version. Okay. And if you check your laptop, if you are using a Windows operating system, okay, you see the .NET framework over there. You see it once you search for it. You see it, you can search for the version you are using. If it needs to be updated or upgraded, you do so. Now it has these components. It has these components. Or let me also say that it provides, it has a class library, a very comprehensive class library, which helps you to develop your applications. So your Windows applications, your desktop applications, okay, your web applications, web services, database applications, and then your console applications. Okay. Now, it has some components. Okay, so some of the key components One is the common language runtime. The common language runtime is an execution engine that runs the .NET application. It manages memory as well as supports multi-languages. Okay, then we have the um, CTS, which is a common type system. There's also the base class library, which contains the various libraries in VB.NET. There's also the framework class library, which contains a collection of reusable classes and interfaces and other types. So for instance, things like input.output, things like database access, things like networking, and the using of the Windows form. Okay, those classes are contained here. The base class deals with libraries like the basic libraries like the input and output, basic input and output, and so on. Then we have the .NET assemblies. There's the XML services or XML web services. There are other ones. There's the ASP.NET, which is for web development frameworks. There is the languages and compilers. So it supports things like VB.NET, C#, F#, and others. And then there's the ADO.NET, which is for database access. So it supports MySQL, Oracle, and so on. Okay. So this .NET framework, how does it work? How does it work? Okay. So when or it helps the developer to write codes in VB.NET or C#. Okay, and the application runs on Windows with access to the .NET framework libraries. So this is the architecture. You have the common language runtime, the framework class library sitting on the common language runtime. Then you have the data and XML classes. You have the ASP.NET web forms, Windows form, all sitting on the XML. Then you have the common language specification. And then this programming language all work with the common language specification, which are all sitting on the common language runtime. So your C#, your C++, your JavaScript, and some other languages. All right, so in developing your application, you'll be required to know the exact version of VB.NET, of .NET framework to use. Okay, and it's very, very important. Okay. Now, we have what we call the .NET framework. There's the .NET Core and then .NET 5+. Okay, so the .NET framework is only for Windows. It's only for Windows. Then the .NET Core is multi-platform, or cross-platform. So it's Windows, Linux, and iOS. And the .NET 5+ is for modern .NET. So the modern .NET, that's the 5+, works with cross-platform applications. Okay, so what will happen is that if you are developing an application that you want to run on not only on Windows, but on multiple platform or cross-platform, then instead of the .NET framework, you use the .NET 5 plus. Okay, but our context now has to do with the .NET framework. Okay, so the if you are using .NET framework, that means that your platform is only Windows. One other thing too is that it's not open source. Okay, whereas the other ones are open source. And then in terms of cloud services, it is limited. And also, um, yes, it's limited. Okay, so there isn't much new features, but the 5 plus and the core, they support, uh, uh, how do we call it, cloud platforms, and also have some updated features. Okay. So the .NET framework, the latest or the last major version, which is the latest, the last major version is the .NET framework 4.8, which was released in 2009. And since then, there hasn't been any update. The only update is the 8.1. Okay, but since then, there hasn't been any much update. So this is the last major version. Okay, the last major version, that's the 4.8, and best for legacy window applications. Okay, then like I said, there's the .NET 5 plus. The 5 plus is the modern one. So the 5 plus has .NET 6, .NET 7, .NET 8, okay, higher. Okay. Now, why do you need this .NET framework? Why do you need it? Because it's very key when it comes to developing enterprise application like for banks, for government systems, and so on. It's also for strong integration with Microsoft products like SQL Server, like the Azure, and also for easy transition to the modern .NET. That's the core or the 5 plus. Okay, you need it to be able to transition to the modern ones. Okay. All right, so basically that is it for VB, a quick introduction. Let me just talk about the IDE we are going to use. Okay. So, okay, let me talk about a few features. I've mentioned some of this already. Features of VB, there's user interface, rapid application development. Using this language, you can use internet and intranet for the application. You can access database. It supports what we call the ActiveX technology, where this ActiveX technology, you'll see more when we are using the Microsoft Excel. We are going to use it in the Microsoft Excel for developing our interface. Okay. All right, so we are using Visual Studio, which is this application, Visual Studio. I think, let me just check if there's what the latest version is. Okay, all right. So the latest version is 2022. There's the community, professional, enterprise. Community is free download. Professional and enterprise, they are paid. And they also have Visual Studio Code here. Okay. Now, like I said, our focus is on the Visual Studio. Okay. You can also use Visual Studio Code, but to mean you have to add a lot of extension in case we are transitioning into the what's it called? We are transitioning into um, the Windows form. Okay. But when you use this one, the Visual Studio, it already has a .NET framework and all the other features. So you can use that. Okay. So if you see here, the community is free for students, open source collaboration, collaborators and individuals. Okay, so for your personal ones, you can download this and install them and install it on your machine. If you are going a bit further with the professional ones, there are, like I said, there are some features that are in your installation, you don't need to install them. Because if you want to install them, the installation will take hours. Okay, the installation will take hours. So if you're installing, just look for the key things. Okay, what am I installing? I'm installing it for VB.NET. So you select that and select the features that supports VB.NET. Else it will install for C Sharp. It will install key things for probably C++, another programming language, and Python. Okay, so if you want to do all that installation, you are going to spend more than 30 gig, more than 10 gig or so, because you've selected features for other programming languages. Okay, so please take note if you are installing, make sure what you are doing is only for VB.NET. Unless you think you will want to write Python or C++ code with it, then you can go ahead. Okay. So be mindful of that. Okay. So it's available for you to download for free. There's a free download with the community version. So let's look at the features. This is the 2010 one. That's like over a decade ago, but some of the things we do is relatively the same. Okay. So you'd have your interface. Okay. Now, anytime you want to create a project, it's just like the 2022 and then the current ones. You'd have a template showing you the various languages you need to select. Okay. So in my case, if you go here, there are other languages. In this context, I'm doing a Visual Basic. So I'll select Visual Basic. Now, after selecting it, you have a lot of frameworks here to select from. Okay, is it a Windows form application? Is it a Windows presentation foundation application? Is it a console application? Is it ASP.NET? Okay. So to start with, we'll be building console application. Then going forward, we use the Windows form. Okay. So if I want the console application, that's more like the command line. So select that. Then the .NET framework. Okay, you select that as well. I'm sure the 2022 version would have um, the 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 core, the .NET core, and then the .NET 5 plus feature. Okay, so those ones are there. So once you have it selected, then you give your application a name. Okay, so um, give your application a name, and then it creates. In fact, where you need to specify where that will be saved, but it creates the interface for you, showing you your model, sub main, end sub, end model, and so on. Okay, so next week we'll go deep into it with looking at the program structure for your VB application and some of the key features and things you need to know. Any question? Any question? Any question?
Yes,
Uh,
Okay.
yeah,
So
yes.
if I want to use the Visual Studio Code, what are the extensions we are supposed to download?
Unless you go and do that research, I've not explored that with Visual
Okay.
Studio Code. Yeah, so since I've been teaching this course, I only always use the VB.NET because you'll be using it in the labs. It will be a
Okay.
lot of work having to tell the lab technician install this, install this, install this, do this configuration, rather than giving them one application, which is the Visual Studio application, which has everything already installed. So they just do a one-time installation and then they have everything. So I'd rather you go and search how you can configure your VS Code to run your uh, VB.NET
Okay.
code, yeah, program. Any other question? Yes, Husseini.
So please, the VB.NET, does it have anything in common with Java?
The syntax is different,
Okay.
but the logic is the same. So logic when it comes to, for instance, the control structures, the if-else statements, and all that, the logic is the same, but the syntax is different. So next week we
Okay.
look at the program structure. So if you take a typical VB.NET program, what are the things you should see? We will talk about that next week. But the logic is the same. You have error, how to handle error. Okay, then the syntax is different. Yeah. Okay. Any other? Any other? All right. So
Okay.
if there's no question,